And on the line with us, Professor Richard Seager of the Palisades Geophysical Institute, the Lamont Research Professor, Earth Observatory of Columbia University, ldeo.columbia.edu is the website. And Professor Seager, welcome to the program.
Hi, Tom.
Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
Tell us about the relationship between climate change and the war in the Middle East.
Yeah, well, you're referring to a paper that we published by Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences earlier this week. And in that paper, we analyzed a drought, a severe multi-year drought from 2006-2010. So it lasted about 3 years that preceded the uprising in Syria in 2010. And what we found was that drought was of an unprecedented length and severity and led to a collapse of the agricultural region of northern Syria, leading to about 1.5 million Syrians leaving that area, migrating to the cities. The 3-year length of the drought was very important because farmers there can maybe survive 1 year. 2 years, their reserves are pretty much going, but if a drought goes on for 3 years, they pretty much have no ability to stay on the land anymore. So this huge migration to the cities where they joined another 1.5 million refugees who had fled to Syria away from the war in Iraq. So in a matter of a few years, you had the population of Syrian cities growing by 3 million people. That's about 30% or more of the population. And reading through the events as they transpired in 2008, 9, 10, this put enormous stress on food prices, on unemployment, on housing prices, health systems, education systems. And we feel that this was one of the contributing factors, not the only contributing factor, but one of the contributing factors that led to the unraveling of Syrian society in 2010, that then led on to the all-out civil war that is still ongoing. Now, the important thing about this drought is that most of our team were climate scientists, and using some statistical techniques and climate modeling, we were able to demonstrate that a drought of this length and severity, critically the 3 years, was made 2 to 3 times more likely by the presence in the Eastern Mediterranean of a long-term trend towards drier and warmer conditions that is being caused by rising greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So by global warming, essentially. The Eastern Mediterranean turns out to be a region of the world where drying is strong and proceeding rather rapidly. So that signal of human-driven climate change is rearing its head above the background noise of natural variability. So not only did the drought contribute to the migration, which contributed to the unrest in Syria, but the drought itself was made far more likely by the fact of human-driven climate change within the Middle East.
Now, a lot of the Middle Eastern chaos, I mean, clearly we can track an awful lot of it back to George W. Bush's decision to bomb basically Afghanistan and Iraq back to the Stone Age. But on top of that, you look at the so-called Arab Spring, which started in Tunisia, a country which is very much right on the edge right now. I remember a few years back hearing that Tunisia also was suffering a record drought and that the government was not able to maintain the price supports for wheat in particular during that era, and that had something to do with the circumstances which led that street vendor to set himself on fire that tripped the whole Tunisian thing. Do you know about that?
Yeah, that was around about the same time that was going on, and there was a lot of discussion then in Egypt and Tunisia about rising food prices, and that was being related to a shock to the global food supply system at that time, related to droughts in Europe, parts of Europe, and over towards Russia, Australia, and so on. So that was kind of like a remote effect that was affecting food prices worldwide, and it was pointed to as being a contributing factor to the uprisings across the Arab region around about 2010. In this case, for Syria, I mean, those stressors would have been operating as well, but we were looking at a very specific case of something that was happening within that country and within the Middle East itself, so that people were feeling the local effects of climate change and how that was impacting drought and the agricultural system within Syria. And Syria has quite a large agricultural industry, so there was a lot to impact there. Going back to your prior comment, though, I mean, it's not clear that if we only had the drought there, that there would have been the unraveling of the Syrian society. The drought was playing out on top of what you mentioned. There were 1.5 million Iraqis that had fled the war and to Syria. So Syria was already feeling a huge burden, and then there was this knock-on effect of a climate change influenced drought on top of that. So they were being hit hard by multiple destabilizing factors at the same time.
So in essence, we can, if we want to know the origin of ISIS and all the horrors and freak show that's going on in the Middle East right now, we can track it back to in large part, to the confluence of George W. Bush's foreign policy and his party's global climate change policy, which is do nothing, keep burning fossil fuels.
Well, you said that, not me. I mean,
yes. I'm the political guy. You're the scientist. I'll say that.
I've said this before, and I'm not afraid to say it again. I mean, the whole fallout began with the invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan. And I remember when the war in Iraq was under full flow, there were many reports saying, look at all these people who are in Syria, and Jordan, and, this could easily destabilize those countries. And maybe that was going to happen anyway with just the war. But then with the climate change influenced drought occurring on top of that, that was really enough to push that next domino over. Now it's not over. The whole story hasn't finished yet, because now Syrian refugees are flooding into Lebanon and Jordan. Those two countries have been affected by this drought. They're going to be shifted towards a warmer, drier climate as a consequence of climate change. They're water-stressed areas already. So that climate change influence is going to be playing out as an additional stress.
And this is really just it's kind of a leading indicator, is it not? I mean, you've got the Indus Valley, you've got all large chunks of India, Pakistan, Bangladesh that are watered by glacial melt out of the Himalayas, and the glaciers are going away. You've got large chunks of South America that are watered by glacier melt out of the Andes, and those glaciers are going away. I mean,
there are many other places in the world where there are similar processes. Mexico is a country that is also likely to experience a drying climate as well, and we can understand that they're
right, and the American Southwest, for that matter.
And of course, the American Southwest, which is where an awful lot of my research is. But we trust that in the Western United States we'll be able to manage it a little bit better. But Syria was an incredibly vulnerable state, and Lebanon is,
right.
Jordan is, and matters will get worse due to climate change there. So we've got to really keep an eye on this and try to plan for and try to prevent the worst from happening. But as you know, I mean, the region is in such dire straits right now that
Well, this is the stuff the Pentagon was predicting 2 decades ago, when in their early analysis of global climate change, that it would lead to economic and then political destabilization.
Absolutely. They use the term threat multiplier, which I think is actually conceptually a very good way of looking at it.
What was that term again?
Threat multiplier.
Oh, threat multiplier. Yes. So, yeah, absolutely. Climate change is a threat.
Climate change may not be the only thing, but when you combine it with other sources of stress, and our experience, we don't have a lot to do with the military, but our experience is when we have come into contact that US and United Kingdom, I believe, military people have
hang on just a second.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Professor Richard Seager, Palisades Geophysical Institute, Lamont Research Professor at Columbia University. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks for dropping by.